So I'm going to talk a little bit about making thumbnail sketches. We had this as one of our basic art terms, and I've provided some links for you to learn a little bit about what they are, but I want to show you what I mean when I say make a thumbnail sketch. A thumbnail sketch is supposed to be a quick planning sketch. It's not supposed to be super detailed. And when we do this, we want to make small boxes and to make our plan in, because when we make a thumbnail sketch, we're planning our composition, and composition is the arrangement of objects in the picture plane. I may want to do a horizontal composition. I may want to do a vertical composition. That's something I need to consider, because if you're going to plan the way you use your space, the orientation of the paper is one of the first considerations you should make. If what you're making is wider than it is tall, you probably want to do a landscape or horizontal orientation. If what you're making is taller than it is wide, you probably want to do a portrait or vertical orientation. It could be called either of those, landscape or horizontal, portrait or vertical. So when I do this, and I'm asking you to do 3 thumbnails, some different compositions. When I see this thing, you can't see this guy, he's exiting the picture plane here, but I asked you guys to do several things to start off with. One, I asked you to use an 80-20 balance of positive and negative space, or 75-25, somewhere in there. So that means basically you're using most of your space. That's the first and foremost thing. When we make artwork, we don't want to just make something really small in the middle of the page that you can't really see from a distance. Artwork should read from a distance. So we want to activate and use our entire space. I also said that you should overlap at least 2 objects. All 3 of these have some overlap here. These 2 are overlapping, these 2 are overlapping. So I've got that covered here. And so that's 2 of the 7 composition tactics. And I've asked you to apply 1 of the remaining 5 of your choice, and you can do more, of course, if you want. But I'm going to consider maybe I'll do the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds means you divide your picture plane up into 3 columns and 3 rows. So it only takes 2 lines to make that, dividing it up. Any place one of these spots intersect is a good spot for a focal point, and along any of these lines is a good spot for maybe a major element or feature. This skull character here, I'll kind of tip it up a little bit so you can see him better. The skull character is would be a good element to go along that line. He's pretty tall. And for a thumbnail, I don't need to worry about making a perfect sketch. I'm just making a really rough sketch to just kind of plan how I might put this in the space. Some simple shapes. Got this little guy here. And that's enough. That's enough of a plan there. That's fine for a thumbnail. It gives me an idea of how I'm going to use the space, where I'm going to put things. I'm not worried about making a perfect drawing yet. This is a planning sketch, a composition sketch, not a final rendering or a final artwork. So there might be, with this one here, I've got this figure along the rule of thirds. I've also got him exiting the picture plane. That was one of our, that means that the object extends beyond the boundaries of the paper. So that's one of the composition tactics. So I'm kind of applying that there too. I've got this along the rule of thirds. This guy's pretty close to the intersection of the rule of thirds here. The shoe is exiting the picture plane, and that's exiting the picture plane. I've kind of zoomed in on it a little bit as well. If I wanted to do another version of this, I could either rearrange my objects to see if there's something I like better, or I could, decide that I want to do this in a different way. And so maybe I've got this thing back here. Nothing says you have to have all of your object, So maybe I decide I really want to zoom in. Zoom is one of our composition tactics. So we've got over here with the grid, we've got rule of thirds. We've got exit the picture plane. Exit the picture plane. We've got a good balance of positive and negative space. We've got objects overlapping. So, and when you make your thumbnails and you turn them in for your work, make sure you have your name on there and make sure you take notes about the composition tactics you're applying. I've given you that presentation again on composition tactics. Hopefully you took the notes and did that assignment last week or the week before. And but on your thumbnails, I want you to write the notes of what kind of composition tactics you're applying. On here, maybe I'll zoom in. Maybe I'll really zoom in on this little hamster face with the carrot. So I'm getting closer to this, and I've got another thing here. Another one of our composition tactics is, what do you think that is? Strong diagonals. So that helps make a composition more effective. So I've got strong diagonals with the way I've got the shoe positioned here. I've got this mouse. I could zoom in maybe even more than I have here. And still got a good balance of positive and negative space because I'm using most of my space. There's just a little negative space back here. And you may have noticed that I've got a piece of paper behind these things. If you, I would encourage and recommend that you either use a big piece of paper or maybe a piece of cloth or a blanket or a towel underneath your objects so that you kind of simplify the background so it's not as distracting and you can see the shadows of the objects that you're working with. So maybe I decide I want to do another composition. I don't know, lay that down, put that right there. Put this guy peeking out from behind. And now that's more horizontal than vertical, again. So maybe, here's my third thumbnail. Again, I want to start off with a box that's about a similar proportion to the paper I'm going to work in. Don't just make a square if you're working ultimately in a rectangle because you're not planning for your space. And so whatever you do, choose your orientation that best uses your space. So I might use, the length of this skull dude here and his body and the mouse. Notice I'm just using kind of basic shapes, not trying to get every single detail, just a planning sketch. And still exiting the picture plane. I'll abbreviate this. Still kind of zoomed in. Still kind of using the rule of thirds. I've got a focal point with this mouse dude over here. Got some decently strong diagonals. If I want, I could maybe change the angles of things to make the diagonals stronger. So I'm doing I'm still overlapping. So I'm still using these tactics. And in whatever tactics you're using, and I'm using the rule of odds because I'm using 3 objects. Whatever tactics you're using, jot that down with your thumbnails so that for every single thumbnail, not just one of them, for every single one. So this is enough for thumbnails. This is developed enough that I can see what I'm doing. I can have a plan of action for my final drawing that I want to make. And then after you've done this and after you've made a plan and you decide which composition you like best, if we're in class, I'd have you still draw from observation. To make it a little bit easier on you, I'm going to ask you to take a photo of your work. And then when you take your photo, I want you to crop your photo so that it's cropped to the same dimensions of what you intend to draw. So in other words, if you initially take your photo and you've got all of your stuff in the middle of the photo and nothing's exiting the picture plane, but you made a thumbnail where it's exiting the picture plane, crop your photo so that your photo is cropped and matches the composition and layout of the thumbnail that you planned. So I'm going to decide which one I'm going to do. I'm going to take a photo and then I'm going to print it and I'm going to demonstrate how I would start this still life sketch.